By the early 1970s, Bruce Lee was on top of the world. He'd done what many thought was impossible. He wasn't just a movie star. He was an international icon, a respected artist, and financially secure. But behind that dazzling smile and electrifying screen presence was a man, living under a level of pressure that most of us can barely imagine. He wasn't just Bruce Lee the actor anymore. He was a symbol, a cultural bridge connecting East and West. He was the hope and pride of millions, a man carrying the weight of enormous expectations on his shoulders. His daily life was a testament to his relentless drive. His training regimen was legendary not just physically, but mentally. He was constantly refining his martial arts, pushing his body to its absolute limits, and diving deep into philosophy. Bruce believed that to be a true master, you could never stand still. You had to constantly evolve, adapt, and grow. This wasn't just about fighting. It was a way of life. This core belief became the heart of Jeet Kune Do, his personal martial philosophy. It wasn't a rigid style, but a framework for adaptability, efficiency, and above all, honest self-expression. He famously said, "Be water, my friend." It was a beautiful, simple metaphor for a profound truth he lived by every single day. But this relentless push for perfection, this constant need to innovate and be better than he was yesterday, came at a steep price. The human body has its limits, and Bruce was pushing right up against them, day in and day out. He suffered from chronic physical strain and a level of exhaustion that would have sidelined anyone else. Then, in 1970, disaster struck. He suffered a severe back injury while training. The pain was excruciating, and for a time, he was completely bedridden. The diagnosis from his doctors was grim. They told him he might never kick again, that his career as a high-octane martial arts performer was likely over. For a man whose entire identity was tied to his physical prowess, this was a devastating blow. It would have been easy to give up, to retreat into bitterness or despair. But that wasn't Bruce Lee. Instead of breaking, he turned inward. He used this forced period of stillness not as a prison, but as an opportunity. He couldn't train his body, so he trained his mind. He plunged into his books, reading voraciously from his massive library of philosophy, psychology, and of course, martial arts theory. He began to write, pouring his thoughts onto paper. He filled notebooks with his ideas on combat, on discipline, on the nature of the human mind and spirit. These writings, born from a period of intense physical pain and uncertainty, would later be compiled into the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, forming the bedrock of his intellectual legacy. He was transforming a moment of weakness into a source of profound strength. He did recover, defying the doctor's predictions. His will was simply too strong. But the world hadn't stopped while he was healing. If anything, the demands on him grew even more intense. Production ramped up for what would become his international masterpiece, Enter the Dragon *, and he was also working on his passion project, Game of Death *. This meant grueling schedules, long days on set, and constant creative battles. He wasn't just the star. He was often the choreographer, the director, and the visionary fighting to keep his unique vision pure. On top of all that, he was keenly aware of the cultural significance of his work. He was representing an entire people, an entire continent, on the world stage. And he felt the immense weight of that responsibility in everything he did. On screen, he was a god. He moved with a speed and power that seemed supernatural. He was invincible, but privately, the man behind the image was battling immense strain. He was a perfectionist in an imperfect world. He was living under the constant glare of public scrutiny, where every move was analyzed and judged, and perhaps the heaviest burden was his own personal expectations, which were higher than anyone else's. He was in a constant state of war with his own limitations. Then came the first major warning sign. In May of 1973, during a dubbing session in Hong Kong, Bruce suddenly collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed him with cerebral edema, a dangerous swelling of the brain. It was a life-threatening event. He was treated and, remarkably, he recovered. But the incident was a clear and terrifying signal. His body was screaming that it was under an unsustainable amount of stress. It was a warning that the relentless pace, the pressure, the drive, was taking a toll that could no longer be ignored. Did he slow down? No. Bruce Lee knew only one way to live, all out. He went right back to work, finalizing Enter the Dragon *, and planning his next moves. He was driven by a fire that simply could not be extinguished. Then, on July 20th, 1973, the unthinkable happened. Bruce Lee passed away in Hong Kong. He was just 32 years old. The official cause of death was the same as his previous collapse, acute cerebral edema. The world was plunged into a state of shock and disbelief. How could this pillar of strength, this icon of physical perfection, be gone? It didn't make sense. Bruce Lee's death marked the end of a life that was as brief as it was brilliant. A life that blazed across the sky like a comet, leaving a trail of light that still inspires us today. We remember him for his incredible physical abilities, for the action hero who redefined a genre, but his true legacy is so much deeper. He was a profound thinker, a philosopher, a man who fought not just with his fists, but with his intellect and his spirit. His fragility, the very thing that led to his tragic end, doesn't diminish his greatness. It humanizes it. It reminds us that even the strongest among us are vulnerable, and that the true measure of a life is not in its length, but in its depth and its impact. Bruce Lee taught us to be like water, but he himself was fire, and his flame will never go out. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as moving as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more deep dives into the lives of legendary figures. See you next time.